It was just after midnight near Burkina Faso's southeastern border. In the dead quiet of night, a strange noise sliced through the darkness. Not a gunshot or a shout, but a high-pitched hum, mechanical and eerie. What could it be? No one knew at first. Then, within seconds, chaos fell from the sky. A single unmanned drone, flying low and almost silent, locked onto a convoy creeping through the bushes. No headlights, no signals, no markings. Who were these people? Inside the trucks were heavily armed mercenaries, draped in Western gear, heavy rifles, encrypted radios, top-grade night vision. They thought they were hidden. They thought they were safe. A flash of light proved them wrong. The lead vehicle vanished in an explosion. The second flipped and burst into flames. The rest tried to scatter, but it was too late. The drone circled back, then again, then again. When soldiers finally arrived on foot, only smoke and twisted metal remained. The scene was terrifying. Who had ordered this strike? And what kind of drone had done such a perfect job? In the days that followed, the truth began to emerge. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the young leader of Burkina Faso, had given the order himself. The drone? A foreign prototype, born in North Korea but enhanced with Russian technology and Burkina Faso's own encryption. Where did it get its coordinates? From intercepted communications and satellite signals bouncing out of Mali and Nigeria. This wasn't a senseless attack. It was a calculated warning. To the mercenaries, to their paymasters, to every African nation pretending that sovereignty wasn't under attack. Burkina Faso wasn't waiting for trouble anymore. It was acting first. For the first time in decades, even Western intelligence admitted they had been blindsided. Investigators pored over the wreckage. What they found was shocking. These weren't rebel fighters. They were professionals. Their weapons gleamed. Their tactics were precise. Their equipment was expensive. Among the debris, investigators found American-made rifles with fingerprint locks, French radios still connected to encrypted networks, and tactical maps written in English showing resource sites across Burkina Faso. And the real shock. Fingerprints from the surviving equipment matched Nigerian nationals, former Special Forces operatives. Some had left elite military units only weeks before. Why were they here? They had no ID, no insignias. They were ghosts, highly trained, highly paid, working under the radar. Following the money told the rest of the story. Satellite tracking showed payments flowing through offshore accounts in the Caribbean. The money was routed through shell companies in Abu Dhabi, London, and Paris. This was no freelance job. It was organized, funded, and approved, but by whom? As investigators dug deeper, they intercepted voice recordings from satellite phones that repeated one code name, Falcon Hand. Traoré's intel team had heard it before. It was tied to sabotage missions across the Sahel, a name used for secret operations needing total deniability. Then came the detail that changed everything. One of the dead mercenaries had a phone still working. Inside, it was a contact labeled DC Handler. If a shadowy handler was guiding them, how deep did this conspiracy go? Traoré called an emergency session of the AES Council. Facing his top officers, he spoke 5 words that set the tone for everything to come. If they send ghosts, we send thunder. In other words, if our enemies attack in secret, we hit back loud and clear. Traoré is a soldier known for restraint. He doesn't launch attacks based on rumors. This time, the evidence was chilling and undeniable. 2 nights before the drone strike, Burkina Faso's Signals Intelligence Unit intercepted an encrypted call. It bounced off 3 towers, one in Nigeria, one in Ghana, and one right in Ouagadougou. A mole was inside the capital. The call was short, coded, but the last line made everyone stop. Operation Broken Spine begins in 72 hours. Within minutes, cyber experts cracked a data packet connected to the call. They found a grainy satellite image, the oil refinery under construction in Koudougou. For Traoré, that refinery was everything. It symbolized economic independence, proof that Burkina Faso could build its future without foreign control. Below the image were coordinates. Above it, a timestamp. The message was clear. Mercenaries weren't coming, they were already there. They intended to destroy the refinery and crush Burkina Faso's momentum. If they succeeded, the country would lose not just a project, but hope. Special forces mobilized quietly. Meanwhile, Drone Command in neighboring Niger was already watching the region. They spotted unmarked vehicles moving at night, avoiding checkpoints, taking back routes. One surveillance photo showed a man in tactical gear with a Nigerian military tattoo on his arm and a patch used by Western-trained peacekeepers on his chest. That was the final warning. At 3:44 a.m., Traoré summoned his war council. 5 top officers sat around him. No politicians, just soldiers. If they reach the refinery, what happens? Traoré asked. We lose everything, one officer answered. Traoré nodded. His face was calm, his voice firm. Deploy the drone. Terminate the threat. This wasn't revenge. It was survival. In modern war, you can't wait for the first shot. You have to stop the fire before it spreads. The drone was no ordinary machine. It wasn't American or French. It wasn't off any Western shelf. This drone was named Na-7, after an ancient warrior queen. It was built under a top-secret program. North Korean engineers helped design it. Russians upgraded the targeting systems. Burkina Faso's own encryption protected its controls. The Na-7 could fly over 800 kilometers without refueling. This model had one mission: wipe out threats before they got close. It had been tested quietly in northern Mali with AES allies. Armed with precision heat-seeking missiles and a custom fragmentation warhead, it was built to destroy convoys without damaging the infrastructure around them. Perfect for modern defense. That night, the Na-7 did exactly what it was built for. And it wasn't just the accuracy that stunned analysts. It was the speed. 12 minutes. That's all it took from the order to launch. Artificial intelligence fed live border data into targeting systems. The drone identified targets instantly, then struck. 0 civilian casualties. 0 second chances. When U.S. satellite feeds confirmed the aftermath, analysts were speechless. One whispered, "Whatever they used, we don't have anything that precise." Suddenly, the world saw Burkina Faso differently. No longer a country lagging in technology. It had shown it could launch a high-tech, fully autonomous strike using non-Western tech. No American support. No French oversight. No strings attached. That was a game changer. The strike was public. The explosion impossible to deny. Yet Nigeria, whose former soldiers had been killed, said nothing. No statement. No outrage. Why? Inside Nigeria's State House, panic was brewing. President Tinubu's team was blindsided. Intelligence agencies tried to identify the bodies but hit a wall. Many of the men had been removed from official records months earlier. They had no orders, no affiliation. But biometric scans told a different story. They were ex-Nigerian elite soldiers now working as mercenaries. And then another revelation. Some had trained at a facility in Senegal known for private security contractors with Western funding. Admit they were Nigerian, and the government risked a diplomatic crisis. Deny it, and they'd still have to explain how Nigerian-trained operatives ended up on a sabotage mission in Burkina Faso. Nigeria chose silence. But across Africa, people didn't stay quiet. African media lit up. News outlets in Mali, Niger, and Nigeria asked aloud, was Nigeria trying to destabilize Traoré at someone else's behest? Burkina Faso state TV ran wall-to-wall coverage, interviews with locals, detailed breakdowns of gear, and footage of Traoré's now iconic speech. Online, people debated who had sent the mercenaries and why. Meanwhile, Traoré's team dug deeper. Symbols on a binder found in the wreckage matched markings from old French military documents. These were blueprints from Operation Barkhane, France's anti-insurgency mission in the Sahel. But the real bombshell was hidden in the communications logs. Every message from that binder had been routed through server clusters in Virginia, Langley, the nerve center of the CIA. France denied involvement. The CIA had no comment. But why were French radios found on dead mercenaries? The evidence pointed in one direction. Foreign powers had their hands in this mission. Traoré knew he had to act quickly. Within hours, He called another emergency AES Security Council meeting. Generals and intelligence officers studied every intercepted signal, every timestamp, every digital trail. The conclusion was impossible to ignore. This wasn't just a Nigerian problem. It was a coordinated proxy operation, approved by people sitting in offices in Washington and Paris. They wanted Burkina Faso to fall back in line. Traoré had crossed too many of their red lines. He nationalized oil. He expelled French troops. He refused IMF loans. He told the world, Africa is no longer for sale. And when leaders refuse to obey, the playbook is clear. Create chaos. Start unrest. Use mercenaries. Deny everything. This wasn't a theory anymore. It was happening in real time. Traoré stood in front of cameras again. If you send agents in the shadows, he said, don't be surprised when we send fire to light up the dark. His words echoed across the continent. The reaction on the ground was electric. In Ouagadougou, thousands of people flooded the square outside the National Assembly. They waved national and AES flags. They sang. It wasn't a protest. It was a celebration. One man cried, "He struck first. Finally!" Young women painted stripes on their faces and chanted, "Burkina is awake. Who's next?" Students in Mali printed satellite images of the strike with bold text, "Don't mess with sovereignty." In Nigeria, emotions were mixed but raw. Some people were furious, feeling betrayed by their government's silence. Others were heartbroken, realizing their brothers had been used as pawns. Clips of the explosion were remixed with Afrobeat music and anti-colonial slogans. Murals of the Na-7 drone appeared on walls across West Africa. Student marches erupted in Ghana, Kenya, the DRC. One sign summed it up. Traoré did in one night what 50 years of diplomacy couldn't. For the first time in decades, an African soldier, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, had become the biggest news story across the continent. He wasn't just a leader. He was a symbol of a new generation rising up. The global reaction? Swift and cautious. In Washington, the White House issued a polished statement. We urge restraint and call for de-escalation in the Sahel. In Paris, the French foreign minister said Burkina Faso's actions threatened regional stability. EU leaders held emergency talks. NATO's intel networks lit up. Western media produced special reports. Is Traoré pushing Africa toward chaos? But in Ouagadougou's secure command bunker, Traoré and his top commanders watched quietly. They knew the West wasn't worried about chaos. It was worried about losing control. Traoré stepped up to the podium. He spoke directly to those calling for restraint. You armed the mercenaries. You trained the saboteurs. You lit the fuse. And now you call us the threat, he said. He stared at the camera. Burkina Faso is not your puppet. Our borders are not up for conquest. If defending our land makes you uncomfortable, good. That means it's working. The clip went viral. Even many Western viewers, tired of double standards, reposted it with captions like, "This is what real leadership looks like." But everyone knew the strike wasn't the end. Intelligence reports warned. More sabotage teams were waiting. Someone else was getting ready to move. Traoré didn't sit back. He called the leaders of the Alliance of Sahel states together. Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger had already expelled French troops. They'd already refused IMF loans. Now they needed to defend what they'd built. The result was Operation Iron Shield. It was unprecedented. 3 African armies linking their intelligence, their weapons, and their defenses in real time. AES satellites were immediately red-asked to watch high-risk zones. Encrypted communications connected Ouagadougou, Bamako, and Niamey. Joint air patrols took to the skies. Burkina Faso's drones, Mali's helicopters, Niger's recon jets. On the ground, Mali sent elite counterinfiltration forces to back up Burkina Faso's border. Niger rolled mobile radar units and anti-air missile systems into position. Burkina Faso locked down its oil, gold, and lithium sites with AES commandos. Each capital set up a command center, synced by satellite feeds and AI. If one nation was hit, All three would respond within 5 minutes. This wasn't just a defense plan. It was a warning. Strike one, face all three. And this time, they would shoot back without hesitation. Other nations noticed. Guinea, Chad, and the Central African Republic sent observers to AES headquarters. They didn't come just to watch. They wanted to talk about joining the shield. Western analysts were stunned. The Pentagon said, "This is dangerous militarization." French commentators called it a rogue alliance. But on Africa's streets, people called it something else. The first real African army. In a historic joint broadcast, Traoré, Mali's Goita, and Niger's Chiani stood shoulder to shoulder. No medals, no fancy suits, just fatigues and calm determination. Their message was simple. Africa is no longer defenseless. We are the shield. We're ready. It was the kind of solidarity many had dreamed of but never seen. The West called it threatening. African youth called it hope. War in Africa has often been controlled from the outside. But the Na-7 strike and Operation Iron Shield show a different future. Wars won't be fought with tanks alone. They'll be fought with drones, with data, with alliances built from shared pain and common purpose. Traoré's words resonated because they spoke to something deeper. The desire to choose your own destiny. Fear is for those who borrow power, he told a reporter. We built ours. It's a reminder that when you stand on your own feet, you don't have to fear threats. Modern Africa is beginning to chart its own path. Yes, the West will respond. Yes, there will be pressure. But the line has been drawn. For the first time in generations, Africa isn't just reacting. It's taking initiative. And anyone who wants to cross that line, who wants to send mercenaries or covert teams, will have to think twice. The story ends back where it began. At the oil refinery in Kédougou, now secured. Traoré stood on the platform with engineers and soldiers. They were ready to resume work. A reporter asked, "Aren't you worried the West will retaliate?" Traoré shook his head. Fear is for those who borrow power. We built ours. He looked out across the horizon. For decades, Africa had been told to know its place. With one drone strike, a bold speech, and a united front, Burkina Faso had sent a different message. We decide our own fate. Now, the world is watching. The question is, who will dare to cross that line next?